You know that feeling? You've been scrolling for who knows how long, you finally close the app, and you just feel kind of empty? Like you just spent an hour on something that didn't really make you feel good at all. Well, it turns out there's a really powerful reason for that, deep inside our brains. And it reveals this surprising truth about how we're wired for both pleasure and pain. So let's dive into the science behind this whole modern dilemma. I mean, wow. If you're not addicted yet, it's coming soon to a website near you. That is a pretty intense statement, right? And it's coming from Dr. Anna Lembke, one of the top experts in addiction medicine at Stanford. It just perfectly sets the stage for what we're going to get into. This modern trap of pleasure and pain that's literally being wired right into our brains. All right, let's start with something we all know, the pleasure trap. I'm talking about that feeling of the endless scroll, right? Getting those little quick hits of validation from a like or comment. And then that kind of hollow feeling that kicks in when it's all over. It's so familiar. So, the story we usually hear goes something like this. Our basic human need for connection has been, well, drugified. These apps, they're basically designed to give us these huge concentrated hits of dopamine. That's our brain's reward chemical, in a way that our ancestors could never have imagined. It's this super intense, immediate high. But, every high has a price, right? To deal with that crazy flood of dopamine, your brain doesn't just go back to normal. Nope, it swings hard in the other direction, creating what's called a dopamine-deficit state. And that is exactly why we can feel even worse after we're done scrolling than we did before we even picked up the phone. Okay, so that's the common explanation. And it makes sense, but what if it's not the whole story? What if there's more to it? Let's go a little deeper into the science here, because this is where our whole understanding of addiction is really starting to change. For the longest time, the big idea was something called the hijack hypothesis. Basically, the theory is that our ancient caveman brains, wired to find important stuff like food and a mate, are getting tricked or hijacked by all this modern tech. The brain sees a like on Instagram and mistakes it for something essential, like finding a berry bush. It's a really simple and honestly a pretty compelling idea. But here's where things get really interesting. What if the brain isn't being hijacked at all? What if it knows exactly what's going on, and it's actually trying to protect itself from a threat? So check out this contrast. The common view is that this is a totally new problem, that modern tech is this newfangled threat. But the evolutionary view kind of flips that on its head. It reminds us that humans have been dealing with plant neurotoxins, think nicotine, alcohol, stuff like that, for millennia. And think about it. Your first cigarette, your first shot of liquor, was it fun? Probably not. For a lot of people, the first reaction is sickness, aversion. Your body's first instinct is to reject it as a poison, not to welcome it as a reward. So something else has to be going on here. And that something else, well, it can be explained with this really great metaphor for how our brain works. It's called the pain-pleasure seesaw. Just picture a simple seesaw, from the playground, right inside your head. And its only job is to stay perfectly level. And this is maybe the most important thing to get. Your brain's primary goal is not to make you happy. I'll say that again. It's not about making you feel good. Its number one job is to keep you stable and alive. It's always seeking balance. The fancy word for this is homeostasis. So this is us at our baseline. The seesaw is perfectly level. One side is pleasure, the other is pain. We're not ecstatic, but we're not miserable. We're just content, balanced. Everything's level. And then, wham, you get that huge dopamine hit. Maybe it's from scrolling social media, maybe it's a piece of cake, whatever. That massive, unnatural pleasure jolt just slams the pleasure side of the seesaw straight down to the ground. And yeah, for a second, it feels amazing. But your brain completely freaks out. To get back to balance, to get back to homeostasis, it throws all of its weight on the other side, the pain side. And it doesn't just bring things back to level, it overcorrects. It slams the seesaw down on the side of pain, anxiety, and craving. That is that empty feeling after the endless scroll. Now, if you keep slamming that pleasure side down over and over, that seesaw can actually get stuck on the pain side. And this leads to a state that has a clinical name, anhedonia. It's a huge symptom of depression and addiction, and it's basically when you lose the ability to feel pleasure from anything normal. A walk in the park, a chat with a friend, a good meal, none of it registers anymore. The simple joys are just gone. Okay, so if it's this powerful biological seesaw in our heads, is fixing it just a matter of willpower? Just trying harder? Not even close. It turns out there are some really powerful forces that can tilt your seesaw before you even get in the game. For starters, your genetics play a huge role. Take a look at this brain scan. See those bright red and yellow areas? Those show a high density of something called D2 dopamine receptors. And it turns out people with more of these seem to be naturally protected against things like alcoholism. Their brains are just built to be less susceptible to that dopamine crash. It shows that for some of us, the seesaw is already tilted from birth. It's basically a biological lottery. And it's not just what you're born with. Your environment, your life experiences, they matter a ton. We now know that long-term stress, we're talking social isolation, adversity, you name it, can actually dampen your whole dopamine system. It kind of presses down on the pain side of your seesaw from the start, making you way more vulnerable to seeking out those big, intense hits just to feel normal. Okay, I know, this is all starting to sound a little bleak, right? But here's the good news, and it's really good news. We are not powerless here, not at all. We can actually actively work to retrain our brains and get that seesaw back to level. So let's talk about how we can start reclaiming our own reward system. So the path forward really comes down to 3 key steps. We've got the reset, the reframe, and then a really crucial final step, the re-engagement. First up is the reset. This is basically what some people call a dopamine fast. The experts suggest at least 1 month, a full month away from your drug of choice, whether that's social media, junk food, whatever. Why? Because it gives that poor, overworked seesaw a chance to finally come back to a level baseline. It lets your brain recalibrate and remember what balance feels like. Okay, step 2 is the reframe, and this one is huge. We have to change how we think about discomfort. As this quote says, a meaningful life isn't free from discomfort, but comes from pursuing what matters despite difficulty. Instead of running from hard things, we can start to see them as a necessary part of a good life. This reframes pain not as something to escape, but as a signpost telling you you're on the path to something that actually matters. And that leads us to the final and maybe the most important step, re-engagement. This is all about shifting our focus. Instead of chasing those external rewards, the likes, the points, the praise from others, we need to build up our intrinsic motivation. That means doing things just for the love of doing them, for the challenge, the curiosity, the pure satisfaction of the act itself. And this isn't some abstract philosophical thing. You can practice this every single day. Think about it. Instead of chasing that quick dopamine hit from an impulse buy online, you could find a much deeper, more lasting kind of good feeling by supporting a business that actually aligns with your values, or choosing a sustainable product, or giving to a cause you really care about. These things, they don't give you that instant sugar high, but what they do is build a real sense of purpose and self-worth, and that's a reward that actually lasts. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. Our whole culture seems obsessed with feeling good all the time, doesn't it? But what if? What if that's just the wrong goal entirely? What if a truly fulfilling life isn't about chasing pleasure at all, but about consciously, day by day, choosing to find what's good and doing it?